Good. Try that again. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the public meeting of planning for Monday, December 13th, 2021. Are there any disclosure of conflict of interest? Seeing none, accept the agenda. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Move myself, seconded by Councillor Wensink, that the Council of the Township of North Glengarry accepts the public meeting agenda of Monday, December 13th, 2021.
Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Okay. Moving on to ratify the minutes. Councillor Madden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Noble, that the Council of the Township of North Glengarry accepts the minutes of the public meeting of planning of Monday, November 8th, 2021.
Thank you. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, moving on to zoning amendment Z15 2021. We will, so go ahead. There's no motion, so welcome, Jacob.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So again, just to remind council, there's no actual voting on this this evening. It will be brought, I guess, to the next January council meeting for voting. There is a conclusion at the end, but there are no recommendations from staff. So it's zoning bylaw amendment number Z15-2021. The owner for this application is Monsieur Michel Longtin. He currently lives in Saint-Hélesphore, Quebec. I have no clue how you say that in English, so it's Saint-Hélesphore in French. Location is 21681 Glen Robertson Road. So it's located just west of the village of Glen Robertson on County Road 10. The legal description is Lot Hill Concession 2, part lots 12 and 13. So that's the property. The village that you see on the right side is Glen Robertson, so it's just outside of town. A little close up right here. So as you can see, there are, it appears like there are two parts on the property because of the railway tracks, but the property is currently all pinned together. So there are more than one roll number, but it's all one pin number. So it's all one property. The frontage part is a little bit narrower, and then it gets wider at the back there. The entire property has an area of 193 acres, so it's a fairly large property. The frontage that you see there on County Road 10, is 332 meters. So a little closer. So the kind of the road that you see there is actually the track. So the driveway of Monsieur Longtin is actually on County Road 10, but it passes, so it's a private crossing for the CN Railway right there, and then you get to the existing building. So that's what we have right now. As you can see, there's already one single family dwelling on the property. That's a little building at the bottom of your screen. And the larger building that you see is an accessory storage building. So it's a garage, shop, something like that, accessory to the single family dwelling unit. The official plan designation. So as you see here, there are two designations. So the portion north of the CN Railway, it's agricultural resource lands, and the small portion, the narrower portion, it's not very clear on that, but the gray zone basically on this one is rural district. So there are two designations, and next slide, that's our zoning bylaw. So that's our zoning designation for the property. As you can see, it follows the official plan, which is how it's supposed to be. So the blue part that you see here is general agricultural, so ag, and the green part is rural. So the entire, like I said, it's all pinned together, but the zoning amendment we're doing right now is basically for the entire blue part. So we're not touching the green part because it doesn't have to be touched right now. It's rural, it's different, so we're only changing the ag part to the special exception. As I mentioned out there, the surroundings, as you know, it's mostly the same as this property. It's mostly large residential rural properties, some agricultural properties also. So I will show it a little bit later on. So the purpose of the zoning application is to rezone the property from general ag to general agriculture special exception, AG 197. and it's to permit a secondary dwelling, so another house, basically, another single detached home on the subject property. So this is what it looks like from County Road 10. So the little bump that you see there is the CN railway tracks. So as I mentioned, it's got lots of frontage. It's a very large property, 193 acres. So the crossing is a private crossing. Talk about that later, but CN were notified and they have no issues with that. So our current zoning only permits one single-family dwelling on that property. Mr. Longtin is currently renting out this property to some people, you know, they're not family, some friends, and he wants to move in on his property. So he is asking permission, so he's asking for this special exception to build his own house on the property, on the same property, without doing a severance. So his plan is to not do a severance. He wants to keep the entire 193 acres together and build another home on the property. So what you see there, the larger building on your left side is actually the accessory building. And then next slide right here. So again, a little close-up of where he's going to put his house. So the single-family dwelling that you see there is an older building, and he's not sure what he's going to do with it once the tenant moves out. But he may rent it out again to a member of the family and whatever. So he's asking to build another house, a secondary home on the property closer. He's got a little pond there. So the little red rectangle that you see is where he's proposing to put his new house. And the lined rectangle, I guess, that you see is where he's proposing to do his new septic system. So the new house would be completely independent of the existing one. He would have another septic system and another well serving that new house right there. So the new house he's proposing, so it's not like the zoning bylaw says secondary home, but the house he's proposing is actually quite large. It's about 2280 square feet with an attached garage, bonus room. So it's a full-blown single-family dwelling, I guess. So again, this picture here, so the other one that I shown, so this one is more from the west side of the property. So we're looking like more northeast. And this picture here, we're looking on the other side of the driveway where you see it's all fields right down to, we don't see it clearly here, but you see the CN railway, and his house is after that. So he's got lots of property. The south portion of it is mostly fields. And then once you get where he's got his dwellings, it's more bush, and he's got the pond there. So that's where he wants to put the house. You will, of course, see the house from the road, but barely. It's got trees, it's got the tracks that's a little bit higher. So it's not like it's gonna be right at the road or whatnot. And why I mentioned earlier that we're not rezoning the rural part, just because we're technically not permitting him to build his house on the south side of the CN railway. So his plan is to build it on the north. So it goes well with this property. So he's only gonna be able to build it on the north side of the railway. He's not going to be able to build a house in this field right now, unless he would do a severance, but I'll go to that a little bit later. So this is the entrance right now. That's our little poster there. So that's the existing entrance. The new house is also going to use that entrance. So there are no proposed entrance to the property. He's going to use the existing one. One of the main reasons is because of that private crossing. So it's hard to get another crossing. They're actually merging them together now. So he's going to use the same one, and it's going to stay like that. If he would apply for another entrance, he would probably have to either merge them together on the property. So he's only got one crossing anyway, because they don't like that. So it should stay exactly like that. We've got no comments back from CN or from any of the neighbors that were notified on this application. Right here. So as you know, provincial policy statement, secondary dwellings are encouraged in the country just for, there's many reasons. One of them is for families and for larger properties like that. It's to accommodate more the people, and it's encouraged both in the provincial policy statement and in the SDG official plan. So The zoning bylaw does comply with both, and it also complies with the Planning Act, where Planning Act says that the council of the municipality is allowed to do such a change because it's compliant with PPS and with Planning Act. So again, to avoid any issues with this, I'll just go back to the site plans. I just want to explain it a little bit more. Right here. So this property here, as I mentioned, is 193 acres. Okay, so it currently complies with PPS and everything. If we apply the change, it still complies. But what may happen with this property is that it's so large that I explained to Monsieur Lontin that he's able to do like a severance with the agricultural part and still have 2 lots that are compliant with our zoning bylaw. So 2 lots that are more than 74 acres, which means that technically he could sever off the property and build a house on both properties. So I explained to Michel that we're passing this zoning bylaw on the property as it is now, but if he severs it off, there would be a condition on the severance that he rezones the property, so he's only allowed to have 1 dwelling on the other side. Just so we're sure that in this instance, you don't have a property that's being severed and you're not allowed to have 2 houses on each property. So I don't know if I'm explaining this right, but we don't want to get stuck with 2 properties on one, 2 properties on the other. And if he decides to sever the rural lands at the front, he could have another dwelling there. So you can end up with a lot of dwellings on the same property. So as soon as he does either a severance for the rural part or for the ag part, there would be a condition on that severance saying that the rezoning will be reviewed and we'll see how many dwellings he can have per properties. So yeah, I think that's it, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jacob. Are there any questions from members of council? Councillor Madden.
The 2 properties south of the tracks that are rural, would say each of those fields be able to be severed off, or would he only be allowed to do 1 severance on that?
It would depend how he decides to do that. So technically, if you have 1 property and at the end of the day, you have 3, you're okay. So in this case, he could decide to sever 2 properties off the rural part of it. So create 2 new properties that are 1 acre in the rural part. But in this case, I asked the county is quickly talking about that, but in this case, because the majority of the property is ag, there would be some conditions and maybe some thinking to do about that. But at this time, Michel didn't want to inquire about that because the plan is to keep it all together. But for future owners, yeah, we'll have to check it out. But he could definitely sever off the rural part. But if he does that, he would also have to like apply some right-of-ways to access the property at the back and some easements and whatnot. So it would be complicated. So that's why he just said, too bad, we'll just use the same thing. We won't even sever off, because he could do, first off, a natural severance because of the tracks, but again, he needs that right away.
Yep.
And I explained to him, he could do, again, 2 ag properties with the large agricultural portion. But again, he's stuck in the same way that he only has 1 driveway crossing multiple. So there would be some issues, I guess, with severances.
Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of questions. So is that agricultural land is currently farmed? Does he rent it out? Do you happen to know? I'm just curious.
He rents out what can be rented. So I'll just show the little map there. Why? Okay, so here, so the 2 fields that you see at the bottom there, they're rented out. The other fields are, I think he did rent them out, but he plans on moving there to start farming, like a hobby farm of his own. So right now, there's only the 2 parts at the back that are being rented, and the rest maybe, I'm not sure. But the plan is to start himself working on the property. So he's going to stop renting them out, I guess, and start working. But there are some bush, a lot of bush on the property, especially where the houses are. So there's the plan is to keep it for himself.
Yeah, I can see. I mean, it looks like a perfect property, really, to be building another residence there, in that it's nicely treed and, you know, it makes sense to me. I continue to have concerns about sometimes these changes that the province makes. That I understand the need to provide for extra housing, since given the shortage and all of that. But I continue to have concerns about what might happen in the future when you've got two residences on one property that can't be severed, and then you've got difficulties kind of selling these properties and potential conflicts down the road and that kind of thing. But that's another matter. But I can
Just sorry, but I think that's been in for a long time, that you could build. I know that they've changed the secondary residence, but you've been
That's
able
what I
to
mean.
build, you've been able to build on, you see it all over, the McRae's do it.
Since 2012,
Granny
Mr.
suites.
Mayor. Since the 1st of January of 2012, they added in the Planning Act that it was actually recommended for properties to have a secondary dwelling.
In agricultural.
In agricultural,
Yeah.
yeah, and rural, whatever,
Around
yeah.
For a while.
Oh, it's been around for a while. Okay, what's the recent change then? Because there was a recent change. No?
No, well, some
Secondary
townships
units.
around are now passing like blanket zoning bylaws that all properties are good to go. So instead of Michelle having to come to us asking for a zoning amendment, you could just right away apply for a building permit. So all the properties are allowed to. So, and some other townships, more like the city of Ottawa, what they do, they're called coach homes. So they're tiny homes instead of secondary dwellings. So Ottawa has more tiny homes and stuff and accessory apartments. Here in the rural areas like that, people want to have another full-blown house. They don't want to have a tiny house. So that's the difference. But yeah, other townships have passed recently blanket bylaws like that.
I see, okay. In any case, it's bizarre in my property, thereby actually taking agricultural property out of production, which is exactly the opposite of what the provincial policy statement tries to have happen when properties are severed and they try to keep these retained portions or severed portions as small as possible. And then they, go and allow this. It's sort of, it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And I understand, why this gentleman's trying to do that. It makes sense. That certainly does make sense. But sometimes I don't understand the province.
There are a lot of issues involved with that. So an option is always to just do for example, the flag lots we make, like the new lots. So some townships in the past, and we've even done it in the past because I see other bylaws, they pass a zoning bylaw just for a certain area on the property. So they change the zoning to exactly where Mr. Dantin wants to put his dwelling. There are some goods and bads with that. The biggest issue we have with that is that after we do that, he's kind of stuck between, you have the setback to the property line. You also have to respect the new setback that doesn't really exist in that new created, where is the zoning and blah, blah, blah. So it does become complicated for that. We do warn people, when they do that, when Michelle comes to us, we do explain very clearly the two houses that are going to have to stay together and whatnot. And most of the time, driveways are not cheap to build, so they don't want to do a 500-meter driveway just to have their house up there. So some problems in the future.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Jacob.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Massey. Thank you. All those in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, we will take a 5-minute break and come back and start the regular meeting of council. I'll start over again. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to all members of council and staff, and to anyone watching on Facebook or here in the council chambers. I will call the meeting, we will open with the National Anthem. Thank you, everyone. Call the meeting to order. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof? Okay, seeing none, accept the agenda. Deputy Mayor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Massey, that the Council of the Township of North Glengarry accepts the agenda of the regular meeting of council on Monday, December the 13th, 2021.
Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion is carried, none opposed. Moving on to adoption of the previous minutes, Councillor Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Noble, that the minutes of the following meetings be adopted as circulated. Special meeting of council, November 22nd, 2021. Regular meeting of council, November 22nd, 2021.
Thank you, Councillor. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor? Motion is carried, none opposed. Okay, moving on to, there are no delegations. Moving on to staff reports. Administrative Department, Raisin Region Conservation Authority Lease Agreement. Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Manley, that the Council of the Township of North Glengarry receive staff report number AD 2021-19 of that council adopts bylaw number 53-2021, being a bylaw to enter into a lease agreement with the Raisin Region Conservation Authority for 3 lots of land described in Schedule A to the bylaw. And that bylaw number 53-2021 be read a first, second, and third time and adopted in open council on December 13, 2021.
Great, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the Raisin River Conservation Authority approached the township a couple of months ago to renew the agreement that you have before you this evening. They were looking at doing just a standard renewal, but we wanted to do a brand new agreement because we're trying to do that rather than do blanket renewals on top, because then what happens is you have your old agreements, and so things change over the years. You'll note this was originally in 1977, so the original document was certainly dated. So we did have it reviewed by legal as well as by our insurance company, and we have included some of the changes in the document as well. Also in the new document, you'll note that there are better schedules. So we did work with Jacob to put together some better schedules, and this will help any questions about where they're located, the 3 dams. And the jurisdiction upon which this agreement can live is with the Conservation Authority Act. So this is something that they normally take on. we will be touching base with Phil and the people at RSCA, and also with Tim to make sure that, the agreement continues. And I know that I've had some preliminary conversations when Tara was here with Raisin River about some of the flow of water through the dams. So that's everything, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion is carried, none opposed. Okay, moving on to Treasury Department 2021 transfer to and from reserves. Councillor Manley, and everybody, you might want to take your time and just sit back. This is a long motion.
Mr. Mayor. Move by myself, seconded by Councillor Madden, that the Council of the Township of North Glengarry approves the following transfers to and from reserves. Transfer from North Glengarry Working Reserves, $96,567. Transfer from Economic Development Reserve, $2,000. Transfer from Federal Gas Tax Reserve, $263,461. Transfer from Alexandria Island Park Reserve at $55,351.21. Transfer from Glen Robertson Rink Reserve, $6,000. Transfer from Dunvegan Association Accessibility, $20,000. Transfer from Safe Restart Reserve, $210,000. Transfer to Planning Reserve, $30,000. Transfer to Facilities Reserve, $67,851.21. Transfer to Fleet Reserve, $111,000. Transfer to Fire Department Reserve, $42,000. Transfer to Maxville Sports Complex Reserve, $50,000. Transfer to Infrastructure Reserve, $108,630. Transfer to GSP Slab Reserve, $125,000. Transfer to Water Reserves, $125,000. Transfer to Wastewater Reserve, $110,000.
Thank you. Welcome, Kim.
Good evening. The purpose of this report is to consolidate and clean up year-end balances for the reserve funds. There were some capital projects that could not be completed or started due to lack of contractors or availability of suppliers. So these monies have been earmarked to be spent, but they weren't spent. So they're not being moved from reserves. There's also other items that were tax funded in the 2021 budget that were not totally spent. So let's say a project was tax funded at 50,000, it only came in, say we spent 10,000. There's 40,000 that we have not yet spent of tax dollars, so we're putting them back to reserves to use them in the future. The details of all the unspent fundings are attached. It's 2 pages. I'm not going to read it. I'm sure it's there in front of you if you have any questions. So basically, the 2021 budget or council resolutions throughout the year determine what is moved to or from reserves. So without this resolution, I have to follow what was budgeted for in the transfer from reserves, even though the funds were not spent. So what this is doing is basically leaving them in the reserves for future use when we need to complete the projects in 2022 or further on. Water and wastewater are self-funded. So these funds in particular need to go back to their respective reserves so they can be used in the future, because the taxpayers and the water and sewer users have already paid for these items. So that's the purpose of this.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council? Deputy Mayor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So how does this work then with what is likely a surplus at the end of the year? Because I thought, excuse me.
The surplus would be higher if these were left as a transfer from reserves, because you're basically putting funds into the budget that we don't need.
Okay, so the surplus would be higher.
Surplus would be higher. Also, you have to think about next year, because some of the items in the 2021 budget that were not completed are now in 2022. So basically, this provides funding to complete those projects.
Okay, and so if I may, Mr. Mayor,
Yep, go ahead.
For example, going to the facilities reserve are monies that were unspent by the MRA group. So, so then that goes into a reserve, which allows them to then use those dollars.
Correct.
In another year. Is that, I'm maybe I'm not remembering things, but when they don't spend their money, don't they have to give that back?
We haven't given it out. They basically, they provide the municipality invoices and we pay the suppliers directly. So for example, if earmarked for Dunvegan is a playground and council has earmarked 10,000 and the playground comes in at 7, there's 3,000 unspent. So why would we transfer it?
I see, okay. So, and right, I see that that's going into a facilities reserve, so never mind. Yeah, gotcha.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion is carried, none opposed. Moving on to the tile drainage loan application. Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Madden, that the Council of the Township of North Glengarry approves the application for a tile drainage loan for roll number 0111-016-019-41000 in the estimated amount of $35,500.
Thank you. Kim?
An owner of a land in a municipality is requesting approval by council under the Tile Drainage Act for a loan for constructing subsurface work on the land. Total work has been estimated at about $47,417 and covers an area of 30 acres. The loan application is estimated at 75% or at $35,500. Just to be clear, the property is located on South Part Lot 16, Concession 9. It's just off of Seven Hills Road near Aberdeen. Basically, once council approves the loan application, the work will be done, and then the tile drainage superintendent will inspect the work, and then the final offer to sell and debenture documents will come to council with the actual number. Like the 35,500 is estimated at this point, but once all the work is done, we will have an actual number. But this is just getting council approval to apply for this tile drainage loan.
Perfect. Thank you. Questions or comments? Councillor Madden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question, Kim, is this is work that's planned for next summer, or is this something that they're looking at doing imminently?
They're looking to do it like now.
Okay, perfect, thanks.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion is carried, none opposed.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Thank you. Moving on to the Fire Department, establishing and regulating Fire Department bylaw. Councillor Noble.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Madden, that council adopts bylaw number 54-2021, being a bylaw to establish and regulate a fire department. The council on this 13th day of December 2021.
Thank you, Councillor. Welcome, Chief.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. The report in front of the council is basically to adopt a new establishing and regulating bylaw. Under the Fire Protection and Prevention Act, every municipality requires to provide fire prevention, public education programs, and other fire protection services. Specifically, Part 2 of the Fire Prevention Act indicates that council must determine what those levels of protections are. And what the establishing and regulating bylaw does, it clarifies and provides clarity as to what services we provide within our township of North Glengarry. The last establishing and regulating bylaw was back in 2018. Since 2018, the fire department has evolved quite significantly. Therefore, we've reviewed a lot of the various services that we've provided and wanted to update the ENR bylaw. Through that, we consulted with the Ontario Fire Marshal's Office, and the current proposed bylaw is utilizing a sample of what is currently approved by the Ontario Fire Marshal's Office as to the format. Some of the areas that we looked at with consultation of the OFM was the various community risk assessments, fire protection agreements that we have in place, administration and governance, record management systems, public fire safety education, inspections and enforcement, emergency response, communication, fire investigations, training, as well as occupational health and safety, Section 21. So along with that, we kind of dug deeper into what our township requires overall, where we looked at our legislative requirements, certain fire marshal directives that are in place, some industry best practices, general functions and core services to be delivered by our fire department, the goals and objectives of our fire service, organizational structure, our authorities, where we want to proceed beyond our established areas of response, authorities to apply cost to property owners for fire investigations, authority to effect necessary department operations. So I've broken down in terms of, there's some new schedules that were applied in terms of the ENR. Schedule A focuses on our organizational chart, where our organizational chart was updated and allocates the various applications and how our organization is going to be moving forward. Schedule B, this is something that was a significant change that we really looked at, was where we really dive deep into what services we provide to our township. Some of these would be like emergency responses, for example, whether we're a frontline where we respond for interior fire attack or for just a defensive. So this is where we are very specific as to what training we provide. So the services are based on what level of training that our fire department currently has. And Schedule B is something that is always should be reviewed based on what our training requirements, and as we build and move forward, some of these services will change as we go through. As well as we also look at the fire prevention and public education aspect within there, fire administration, communication, the various trainings, and also including our maintenance. Schedule C, this outlines the terms and conditions of employment of our fire department and our volunteer firefighters, and also includes hiring requirements as to what our requirements are within our township, the discipline, leave of absence, termination, and also remuneration. One specific change that we brought to bring forward that's included in Schedule B is the proposal of adding an auxiliary firefighter program. What the auxiliary firefighter program is built for is to provide an opportunity for firefighters that either are retiring, have reached the age of 65, and still won't be part of our fire service. This would be assisting the fire department in a non-suppression activity where they wouldn't be exposed to any specific requirements. However, the fire department can certainly utilize them in a very operational aspect, such as training or driving vehicles or whatever the case is deemed appropriate as per their training. Schedule D, this is remuneration. This is where these rates are approved by council and are continuously changed yearly as approved by council. Schedule E, this is another addition that we've never had within our township that is required, is a fire prevention policy. So this was added to the ENR, where it establishes procedures and what we're going to be providing the township in terms of our level of inspection and prevention programs that we deem necessary to have a proper prevention program. It also outlines what our senior fire prevention officer is going to be doing each year in terms of the amount of inspections, and it's broken down specifically for based on industry, schools, and vulnerable occupancies and so forth. Overall, in terms of financial implications, this falls to the fees and charges, and any remuneration changes have all been accounted for the upcoming budgets, and constantly go forward as those budgets change. That concludes the report.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Any questions or comments? Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, Matt, this is a great document. Wow, so complete in there. I've been very impressed, especially with the here at the things at the end or whatever with the schedules for prevention and that kind of stuff and schools and all that kind of thing. That's great. Just a quick question. I didn't notice anything about, and maybe I just missed it, driver's license requirements. Like I noticed in there, it says a G license. Is there something in there that talks about D or AZ as well?
Yeah, so basically the volunteer requirements, that's to apply to our fire service. What the basic requirements are is a G. Our training and policies require a D license. So it's not specific to what the ENR would require. Our training policies require every firefighter to, it's part of their training program where they go through and they're required to have a D license.
Okay,
within 1 year.
okay. And I noticed that under your auxiliary firefighter, it said are permitted to operate any fire department vehicle. I presume that again would be with a correct
That's correct.
designation on their license to operate that vehicle.
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with Councillor Manley. This is an excellent document, and I think it's a terrific idea to introduce this auxiliary firefighter program where you're retaining a lot of that accumulated expertise and then, being able to continue to benefit from that. It's a great idea. Just a question with regards to remuneration. I'm just looking at the chart. I think it's in Schedule D. And I'm wondering what standby is, standby pay.
So standby pay is whenever there's a call for service, whenever all the vehicles have left, whether it's then determined whether or not it could be if the incident is terminated or we have enough firefighters on scene, any additional firefighters that respond that do not respond to the actual incident, they're then paid for standby pay only. So they're not actually responding any further than any station that they responded to.
I see, okay. And just one follow-up, please. Just with regards to the 2021 hourly salaries, and then I don't remember where I read this in here. 2018 is also in here somewhere. Is the increase, because I see for officers there's an increase here in between 2018 and 2021 of $2.62. Is that exclusively a cost of living increase?
Correct. That would be the cost of living that's approved by council each year.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion is carried, none opposed. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, moving on to Public Works Department. And before I begin, I would just like, it's his first day on the job today, so I'd like to welcome our newest member, our Public Works Director, Tim Wright. And so Tim has over 11 years of experience in the construction sector, and for the last 7 years has been delivering projects in Ottawa for the federal and municipal government in a leadership role on both heavy civil and commercial construction projects. Tim earned a Bachelor of Engineering from the University of Sydney in Australia with a focus on civil and project management, and moved to Canada in 2012. As a resident of North Glengarry, awesome, he is very much looking forward to working with all of council, staff, and all community partners and residents to meet the needs of the township. So welcome, Tim, and thanks for joining us tonight. Okay, so on to the roads needs study. Councilor Madden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councilor Wensing, that the Council of the Township of North Glengarry accepts the 2021 roads needs study as prepared by McIntosh Berry. And the Council adopts the 10-year capital plan for road reconstruction as detailed in Table 9.2 of the 2021 road needs study. And the Council recognizes the importance of the additional works as highlighted in Table 9.3.6 to improve the quality of the township roads, and will endeavor to find additional funding for these roads over the next 5 years.
So I'm hoping, Tim, that in the 8 hours you've been here today, that you will give us a full and complete comprehensive report on this. Okay. Madam CAO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Although I was speaking to Tim today, and he did offer to take this on because he noted that in his previous jobs, he's usually had to do things like this on his first day. Certainly, though, Tim has reviewed the document. We did talk about it a couple weeks ago and also last week when we went and looked at the roads. So Council had the presentation by McIntosh Perry a couple of weeks ago. I think we were all very impressed by the work that they did. It was a very good presentation, as well as the document that's attached to the report. So the resolution is drafted sort of on purpose. Not sort of on purpose, it is absolutely on purpose. So what we're looking for this evening is to have this 10-year capital plan approved, which is cited in table 9.2. And I can tell you that the treasurer has built into our draft capital budget for 2022, the roads that are built in here in the 2022 column, which is around $1.1 million. In the unique part about the roads need study that you'll see before you this evening is also in this table number 9.3.6. And council may be aware that we did receive extra OCIF money, which the treasurer and I are looking at right now. We will bring a report to council in January about what we would like to spend the money on. But what we are talking about is the consideration of the roads that are in blue, because that was the first priority to which McIntosh Perry suggested we move on to into 2022. We will be speaking to, obviously, this is going to be on Tim's radar for sure, as well as the roads manager, Mike, to see if the roads in that column in the blue would qualify for something that we could spend on the OCIF, obviously to be approved by council. And then the green would be another option as well. So I'm very pleased to present this report to council this evening. It will be a crucial addition to the asset management plan, which will be coming to you in 2022 or 23. We are very impressed, as well as the other schedules are in here. I know myself, even just reading it, I know I learned quite a bit about, I'm not an engineer by reading it, but certainly it was very well written and well put together by McIntosh Perry. And it's very much something that staff can use go forward.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from members of council? Councilor Manley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I agree. It's an excellent document moving forward, and I'm so glad we've got it. As we talked about a little bit on the roads needs, or on the roads tour, I think if council could be involved in sort of the decision making as well in the roads themselves, because I think we did point out a few things that maybe we're wondering, are those really? Can we? I mean, there may be some things that we can move around a little bit. So as long as we could make sure that council is involved in that would be fantastic.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. Through you, Mr. Mayor. As well, you'll note that we are doing the speed study, right, and some traffic counts, which is important. And that was some of the data that we were missing through this. So certainly to your point, Councilor Manley, we did speak about one road that it certainly has some additional residential traffic. And when we were looking at the one schedule, which suggested that the need for that road wasn't as high as what we would have anticipated, it was more than likely built into some sort of formula based on, that traffic count from back in whenever the last time it was done. So this is a living, breathing document. It's taken a snapshot today. It doesn't mean that we don't do, through Tim's expertise as well, some changes to it in the future. But I think the most important part is we have an excellent document to work with.
Perfect. Councilor Massey.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. On Jeff's point, I think 2 weeks ago when we were presented this document, I had asked that before, I'm okay with the amount putting the amount in the budget, like Jeff, if we could have a special meeting, like a road special meeting or something, and to decide the way forward on these roads,
That'll be presented to us at budget time, and we'll go through and look at the roads.
But being a big number, get everybody from all the wards input on it too also. Whereas before we usually took the advice of the road department to adopt something. So now we should maybe take a more active role
I think that was what the purpose of the roads tour was to
Yeah.
check these roads out that were on that list for this upcoming year, and we had some discussions about them as we went.
Yeah, but the last few years, we basically went on advice, but now, so if we can just take an important half an hour or an hour discussion at our next budget, so we don't rush through these things. And then do it.
Deputy Mayor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to clarify that the option we're choosing here, because we were given like 3 options, which is basically planning on a similar amount that we've been investing every year and continuing to do a similar amount
Yes.
over the next 10 years. We're not going with option B or option C.
No, through you, Mr. Mayor, but what the resolution reads is that, that council's giving direction to staff, because I don't know that that's ever happened in the past, to go and look for or apply funding to the roads there. Because what we see in the document is that based on just doing the white roads up there, that over time the condition rating will go
Right.
down. So the idea is that we would maintain the condition rating over the 10 years to incorporate those blue roads. So now with the Public Works Director and with Kim and myself, we can sit down and really look at what we can do over this 10-year period to close the gap, right? Because we do have a bit of a gap, not as bad as I thought, to be honest with you, because we do invest quite a bit of money in our roads every year. So we were quite pleased that that's already built into the tax base. But we do have some gap we'd like to close to maintain that condition rating. And then, of course, we have the Cadillac version, which is including that third option.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to clarify that we were sort of status quo on that. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Madden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 2 points, well, actually 1 point, 1 question. I thought it was interesting that they did mention that though they say that we're underfunded, our condition rating has gone up over the last number. We're going to adopt this 10-year plan. How tied to it are we?
Or not?
By doing that? Okay. I just wanted to know, there was one example that was a little glaring to me. It said that they sort of laid this out, they planned this based on sort of need, proximity, and they had a few factors that were in there. I noticed that Kenyon Dam, they had it slated for I think next year, if I'm not mistaken, from concession 2 to Kenyon 1. And then 2 years later, they have it on from concession 2 to 45.
Okay.
So it's this short section. I'm kind of wondering why we wouldn't just do it all at once, right? But I just wanted to know how tied we were to it. And
It's a guide. It's a guide for us. It gives us an opportunity to look at it and, with no political bending towards, I want this done in this ward, I want this done in this ward. It's exactly what we're looking for, is to tell us what needs to get done. And of course, it's at the will of council. We make the final decisions on everything. And there's as we know, we've seen roads cave in that we've had to move to the top of the list. So stuff like that happens.
yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and also, as part of the package, I was very clear I wanted the actual Excel documents, because Tim has promised me he is a bit of, I'm going to use your words, a nerd when it comes to that stuff. And as well, like a lot of it's built on formulas, right? So the one road that Councillor Manley was referring to, we can kind of dig in and see exactly how that didn't get, make the highlight reel. As well as we get more information about traffic, et cetera, we can start to change the condition, like the calculations in there, to see where we end up. So it'll be a living, breathing document. I know already Zoe used it for the package that you received for the road tour. She took and could, organize them based on the roads that were up for 222. And the actual comments in there are very helpful, right? Because that was one of the things looked to me like it should have been on the list, yet it didn't make it. So we can certainly look. It's a draft, and council can't pre-approve future budgets either. So every year this will come to council for consideration in the budget.
Well, we can try to pre-approve budgets. Okay, any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion is carried, none opposed. Okay, and items under the consent agenda, Councillor Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Noble, that the council of the Township of North Glengarry receives the item from the consent agenda for information purposes only.
Thank you. Any questions on the consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion? Motion is carried. And no new business. Notice of motion, next regular public meeting of council will be Monday, January 10th, 2022 at 7 p.m. And question period. Are there any questions from the audience? Ken?
In last week's paper, it said that Roger was putting up the power on the first of May. The power in Greenfield and Glen Robertson still going ahead or is it not?
There was one slated for Greenfield, I believe, near Glen Robertson. Are those still moving forward? Yes, go ahead, please.
I just wondered because they're putting another one on Apple Hill. I thought maybe the Greenfield one would be
Okay, good. Okay. Confirming bylaw, Councillor Manley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Madden, that the Council of the Township of North Glengarry receives bylaw 55-2021, and that Council adopt bylaw 55-2021, being a bylaw to adopt, confirm, and ratify matters dealt with by a resolution, and that bylaw 55-2021 be read a first, second, third time and enacted in open council this 13th day of December, 2021.
Thank you, Councillor. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion is carried. So this brings us to adjournment. This is our last meeting of the year. So I'd just like to take this opportunity on behalf of council to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Au parole du concert, j'aimerais vous souhaiter un joyeux Noël et bonne année et soyez prudents. Please stay safe and healthy, and thanks, and we will see everyone next year. Have a great evening, everyone.